Honorable members and fellow Kenyans, it is a great honor to present to this August House and to the country the highlights of the budget for the financial year 2020-21. I do this in performing my fiduciary duty and fulfillment of the requirements of Section 40 of the Public Finance Management Act 2012 and the Standing Order number 241 of the National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, at the outset, allow me to take this early opportunity to express my sincere gratitude to His Excellency the President of the Republic of Kenya, Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta, for appointing me to the position of the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury and Planning to provide leadership in economic and financial affairs of the country. Mr. Speaker, allow me also to express my deep appreciation to the Chair and members of the Budget and Appropriation Committee, Finance and National Planning Committee, as well as the departmental committees of the National Assembly for their constructive engagement and support in the review of the financial year 2020-21 budget estimates and the financing measures. Mr. Speaker, in February 2020, we submitted to this House the 2020 budget policy statement. During that time, our financial projections assumed a normal operating environment. The economy was projected to grow by 6.1% in 2020, which was an improvement from 5.4% in 2019. Indeed, we had set on a conscious journey of fiscal consolidation, targeting a lower fiscal deficit of 6.3% of GDP in the financial year 2019-2020, 4.9% of GDP in 2020-21, and ultimately 3.0% of GDP over the medium term. This plan was premised on a strong revenue growth, reduction of non-core expenditures, and a gradual slowdown in the growth of the public debt. Mr. Speaker, you may recall that early in the year, this House considered our proposals and approved the economic and financial strategies in the 2020 budget policy statement. Mr. Speaker, the global outbreak and the rapid spread of the COVID-19 pandemic has led to the contraction of the global economy with disastrous consequences. The pandemic and the attendant containment measures aimed at saving lives have disrupted the business environment, including international trade, leading to loss of livelihood for millions of people globally. Mr. Speaker, Kenya has not been spared. Evidently, the pandemic and the swift containment measures, including the closure of the airspaces and borders, curfews and cessation of movements in some counties, among others, have not only disrupted our ways of lives and livelihoods, but to a great extent, business. These measures, including enforcement of basic hygiene and social distancing, were not only necessary but also timely, as they have indeed stemmed a surge of infections and loss of lives. In addition to the adverse effect of COVID-19 pandemic, our economy also experienced two other shocks. First, the massive invasion of swarms of desert locusts that damaged crops. Secondly, the floods that led to loss of lives and livelihoods, displacement of people, and destruction of infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, cognizant of the magnitude of the multiple challenges, particularly the COVID-19 pandemic, the government moved swiftly to intervene and implement a range of measures to mitigate against the adverse effects. Overall, these measures have provided the much-needed relief to the economy through injection of cash and provision of additional disposable incomes to the people and businesses. Mr. Speaker, the government also lowered the value-added tax rate from 16% to 14%, reduced tax rates from both corporate and personal income from 30% to 25%, and provided 100% tax relief for persons earning a gross monthly income of up to 24,000 Kenya shilling. Further, in order to support the micro, small, and medium enterprises, the turnover tax rate was lowered from 3% to 1%. Mr. Speaker, in order to support the economy, the government instituted various monetary policy measures to enhance credit access by the private sector at an affordable cost. This was achieved through introduction of central bank rates from 8.25% to 7% and lowering of the cash reserve ratio requirement from 5.2% to 4.25%. Consequently, this intervention released Kenya shilling 35 billion to commercial banks, allowing them flexibility with regard to requirements for loan classification and disposition. Indeed, since March 2020, banks have restructured loans in excess of Kenya shilling 360 billion, including Kenya shilling 190 billion of personal loans. Further, Mr. Speaker, listing with the credit reference bureaus of any person, micro, small, and medium enterprises, and corporate entities whose loan account falls overdue or is in arrears was temporarily suspended. In addition, in order to enhance liquidity for business, the government provided Kenya shilling 13.1 billion to settle verified pending bills owed by ministries and departments, and a further Kenya shilling 10 billion for payment of verified VAT refund claims. Mr. Speaker, to cushion the vulnerable in our society, particularly the emerging urban vulnerable, the government provided an additional Kenya shilling 10 billion to boost the ongoing traditional current cash transfer program. Similarly, the government allocated Kenya shilling 1 billion to recruit health workers to strengthen the health capital capacity of the Ministry of Health, while allocating Kenya shilling 400 million for food and non-food commodities for affected households. Mr. Speaker, the government also established the COVID-19 Emergency Response Fund to receive voluntary contributions from well-wishers towards defraying expenses associated with this pandemic. Mr. Speaker, in order to gainfully engage our youth, the government rolled out the Yatani program designed to improve public hygiene standards and undertake urban civil works. Already, 26,000 youth are engaged in the pilot phase. To further cushion citizens and business from the adverse effects of COVID-19 pandemic and to stimulate economic activity going forward, His Excellency the President, on May 23, 2020, unveiled an 8-point economic stimulus program. I'll be elaborating on the economic stimulus program later in my statement. Mr. Speaker, over the last few months, revenue collections shrank considerably due to slowed economic activities attributed to COVID-19 pandemic. Conversely, there was a rise in public expenditures to address the targeted interventions. In light of this, the government reached out to the multilateral and bilateral development partners for additional funding. Indeed, the response from the development partners was prompt and also generous. A number of them provided assistance in form of grants and highly concessional funds and personal protective equipment. Mr. Speaker, allow me to highlight some of the significant financial assistance that Kenya has received from multilateral partners. First, the country received Kenya shilling 78.3 billion under the Rapid Credit Facility of the International Monetary Fund to help address the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. This financial support is fully concessional at zero interest rate. Second, we received Kenya shilling 108 billion from the World Bank under the second development policy operation as both budgetary support and extra resources to help fight the pandemic. At the initial phase of the COVID-19 outbreak, the World Bank extended support of Kenya shilling 6.8 billion under the contingency emergency response to the Ministry of Health for prompt preparation and response. Mr. Speaker, the government has also received Kenya shilling 22.5 billion from the African Development Bank as a concessional loan, an additional Kenya shilling 7.5 billion commitments from the European Union in form of grants. With this support, Mr. Speaker, will not only strengthen our healthcare systems with the requisite equipment, supplies, and medical personnel to respond to the pandemic, but also fund other critical interventions in the budget. We express our sincere gratitude to our bilateral development partners and multilateral institutions for standing with us during this challenging time. Mr. Speaker, the financial year 2020-21 budget responds to the current challenges facing Kenyans, businesses, and the economy at large in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic. It's in this context that we have chosen the theme for this budget as stimulating the economy to safeguard livelihoods, jobs, businesses, and industrial recovery. The theme underscores our determination to protect lives and livelihoods and cushion vulnerable citizens against the adverse effects of COVID-19. This is further expected to create and protect jobs, stimulate industrial growth, and ultimately steer economic recovery.